Today, story is Whispers of the Forgotten Battlefield. Listen, I don't usually tell people this story. It's too strange, too disturbing. But if you really want to hear it, fine. Just don't blame me if you have trouble sleeping tonight. This happened years ago, back in 1917 during the First World War. You've probably read about those brutal trench battles, soldiers trapped in mud, fighting for their lives in the freezing cold. But there's something they don't write in history books, something that happened in a forgotten corner of the battlefield. It all started when a group of French soldiers got a strange order. Their commander told them about an abandoned trench, one that wasn't on any map. It had been dug up months ago, then suddenly sealed off, as if someone wanted to erase its existence. The mission? Go inside, investigate, and report back. Simple, right? That's what they thought. Among those soldiers was a man named Etienne Fournier, a good man, not easily shaken. He had seen war's worst horrors. The bodies, the blood, the way death crawled through the trenches like a living thing, but nothing had prepared him for what they found that night. As soon as they stepped into that trench, something felt wrong. The air was thick, heavy, like it was pressing against their skin. There were no bodies, no weapons, no signs of life, just dead silence. And trust me, silence is never a good thing on a battlefield. Then they saw the marks, deep scratches along the wooden support beam, like something had tried to claw its way out. Maybe it was a wolf, one of the soldiers whispered. No wolf does this, Etienne muttered. They moved deeper, their boots sinking into the wet mud. The trench twisted and turned, leading them further away from the front lines, further into the dark. And then they heard it. A whisper. Not a voice, not the wind, something else, something that moved around them, above them, inside them. It crawled under their skin, filling their heads with words they didn't understand. One of the soldiers panicked. He turned to run, but as soon as he did, he vanished, just like that. One moment he was there, the next, he was gone. No scream, no shadow, nothing. Etienne and the others froze. What the hell was that? Someone hissed. Nobody answered. Then, one by one, they started disappearing. A soldier would turn his head, and in that split second, gone. No sound, no sign of struggle. The trench was swallowing them whole. That's when Etienne saw it. A figure standing in the darkness ahead, not a soldier, not a man. It was tall, too thin, its face wrapped in filthy bandages, the air around it twisted, like reality itself was trying to escape from it. And those whispers, they were coming from inside it. It lifted its hand. And the last thing Etienne remembered was the feeling of something pulling him, dragging him into the abyss. Weeks later, another group of soldiers found that trench, empty, no sign of the men who had gone in. All they found was a single letter, buried in the mud, Etienne's letter. A desperate, half-mad warning scribbled in shaking handwriting. Do not enter. It takes us. It keeps us. It waits for more. No one ever spoke of it again. No reports, no records. The trench was sealed, wiped from maps, erased from history. But sometimes, when the wind howls through the fields of France, some say you can still hear them, the whispers of the lost battalion calling for help. Next story is The Cursed Bunker. If you think war is just about bullets and bombs, you're wrong. There are things out there, hidden in the ruins, waiting in the darkness. Things far worse than enemy soldiers. I should know. I barely survived it. This happened in 1944, near the end of World War II. Our battalion was deep in the Ardennes forest, caught in a brutal fight against the Germans. The war had already taken too much from us: friends, sanity, hope. But none of that compared to what we found that night. It was supposed to be a simple scouting mission: find an abandoned German bunker, secure it, and report back. That's it. No gunfire, no danger. Just a cold, miserable walk through the forest. But the moment we found that bunker, I knew something was wrong. It was old, too old. The concrete walls were cracked, covered in strange symbols, not German, not any language I recognized. The metal doors were rusted, yet something had scratched at them from the inside. Deep, jagged marks, like fingernails digging into steel. "We shouldn't be here," one of my men whispered. But orders were orders. We forced the door open and stepped inside. Trapped in the dark. The air inside was thick, stale, suffocating. The smell of rot clung to everything. The deeper we went, the colder it became, like the walls were draining the heat from our bodies. Then we heard it, a whisper. Not in German, not in any language we knew. It slithered through the air, creeping into our ears, making our heads pound. Private Carter, the youngest of us, suddenly grabbed his rifle and aimed into the dark. "Did you hear that?" he hissed. We all did. A footstep, slow, deliberate, coming from deeper inside the bunker. We raised our weapons, flashlight shaking. "Who's there?" I called. My voice echoed back, warped, twisted, like something was repeating it in a different voice. Then Carter screamed, "The thing in the shadows." His body lifted off the ground, his limbs twisting unnaturally. We could only watch as something pulled him into the darkness. A shape, tall, thin, its face stretched like melting wax, its mouth too wide, filled with black teeth. It spoke, but the words weren't human. The bunker came alive. Shadows moved on the walls, reaching for us. The whispers turned into screams, voices of men long dead. One by one, my squad was dragged into the blackness, disappearing without a trace. I ran. I don't know how, but I found the exit. The door slammed shut behind me, and the whispering stopped. I turned back, panting, heart hammering. The bunker was gone. Just an empty clearing, like it had never existed. They never found my men. Their names were wiped from records like they had never been there. But I know what I saw. I know what took them. And sometimes in the dead of night, I still hear that whisper, calling my name, waiting for me to return. Next story is The Forgotten Cry of No Man's Land. You ever hear a story so strange, so impossible, that it just stays with you? Something you can't explain, but deep down you know it happened? I have one of those stories. This isn't something you'll find in history books. No records, no reports. But it happened. And if you ever find yourself wandering the old battlefields of Belgium, you might hear the echoes of it, the last cries of the men who never made it out. This is about Lieutenant William Will Carter, a man I once knew. And the night he and his unit walked into no man's land and never walked back out. It was 1916, the middle of the First World War. The trenches had become nothing but muddy graves, thousands of men dying for inches of land. But there was one particular stretch of no man's land between the British and German lines that was worse than the rest. They called it the Hollow Ground. Men sent there never returned, not dead, not alive, just gone. Some said it was a cursed place, a pit where the dead refused to rest. Others believed the Germans had set some new kind of trap, something too horrific to speak of. Then came the order. Carter's unit was sent in to find out the truth. Carter was a good man, sharp and fearless, but even he hesitated before stepping into the hollow ground. The moment his boots hit that dead earth, the air changed. Too still, too silent. Even the usual gunfire from the enemy side had stopped. His men followed, rifles up, moving through the darkness. That's when they saw them. Bodies. Dozens of them. Frozen mid-motion. Not collapsed like fallen soldiers, but standing upright, as if they'd turned to stone in the middle of running. Their eyes were open, mouths twisted in silent screams. One of Carter's men, Private Dawson, reached out to touch one. And then he screamed. But it wasn't just his voice. The entire battlefield screamed with him. The bodies started moving, not like men, not like anything human, twitching, jerking, turning their heads too far, their mouths stretching too wide. The sound, God, the sound, it was inside their heads. A terrible, endless wail of pain and rage and hunger. The men panicked. Some fired their rifles, but the bullets did nothing. Carter shouted orders, but his voice was lost in the chaos. One by one, his men were dragged into the earth, their bodies sinking as if the mud itself had swallowed them. Carter ran. He had no choice. He ran and ran until his legs failed him. But before he could escape, something caught him. A hand, but not a human one. It was cold, wet like the grave, pulling him down. His last words, barely heard over the screaming, "Don't follow. It wants more." The next morning, reinforcements arrived. But the hollow ground was empty. No bodies, no weapons, no sign that Carter or his men had ever been there. Just silence. They say if you stand there at night, you can still hear them. The whispers, the screams, the voices of men forever trapped beneath the mud. Did you listen to this story in the dark, all alone? Did you hear a strange, unfamiliar sound? Or perhaps you felt the whisper of cold breaths. Maybe someone is watching you too. If you enjoyed this story, then like the video, share your thoughts in the comments. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Get ready for the next story. But here's a piece of advice. Next time, don't turn off the lights. Did you listen to this story in the